cost of software is going to zero. We built something that was very, very fancy and very, very complicated and very, very clever and entirely the wrong thing. AI is like PhD level in various fields at the moment, and at the same time incredibly stupider than a fish.
So it's Mark Kelly in person with Sean Blanchfield. So 8 years since we last chatted, met in person. Lots happened since then. And in some ways, the world's completely changed. In other ways, it hasn't really changed too much. But you're now CEO. Jentic has come up. New baby. Why are you getting back into the world of startups? Or maybe have you ever even left the world of startups? Why another one?
I never left. I don't think there's anything else I can do at this point. I've never really had a real job unless you count paper round when I was 12 that I got my first computer with the proceeds from, or one or two summer jobs in college. Yeah, because the first company was an undergrad thing and it just went from there.
So do you think you're unemployable?
I'm afraid I might be. Yeah. And even if I thought I was employable, I'm not sure anyone else would. You know, would I stick around? I mean, I could only, I'm not sure. I'd like to find out, but there's a chance I wouldn't.
So for people that don't know, tell me about your story about Demonware and how did that come about?
We already had a company, Forest, Ronan Percival, Dylan Collins and me. Forest is still going. At the start, it was a different kind of company. Yeah, Forest is great.
Like I said about around the Deloitte Top 50.
Yeah, it's leading
or fastest growing
salon management platform. Certainly in Europe, possibly globally. And it's private equity backed, and Ronan ran with that company and built it up the long hard way, and there's good podcasts about that. But that all started off with the three of us as undergrads getting into business together, and then we had the idea for Demonware during the early days of Forest.
So you had the idea, you felt confident, but you had the ambition to kind of go with it. How did it get going and scaling? I want to also hear about some of the marketing kind of tactics, because there's some really interesting marketing tactics to kind of amplify.
We sketched out the idea of middleware for video games for networking. And this was 2002. So online multiplayer wasn't really, hadn't taken off yet. You could do it on PC. There were some online games on PC like Quake and Counter-Strike and EverQuest, but you couldn't do it on Xbox or PlayStation. So we decided to make a bet that this was probably going to go mainstream, break out of the computer labs of colleges and get into people's living rooms on their main games consoles. And when it did, someone was going to have to be there with the tools, the picks and the shovels to sell to the game studios to help them do networking for the first time, because their experience to that point would have been in games design and graphics. So yeah, we recruited from Trinity, from the lab I was in, the distributed systems research group there, and we raised money. And it took, I think, 9, 10, maybe a full year to raise a seed round in 2003. This is post-dot-com bubble crashing back then, so there's a lot of scarred people and companies who had collapsed at that point, who had been overpriced. But we got it over the line with Enterprise Ireland and DBIC, who were based in this building. So I was in this building pitching as a 22-year-old over 20 years ago. And we raised $500,000 and we went for it. With that team, we'd got out of Trinity. You know, we spun it out of Forest. We split the companies like fully, and we started building. And we built something that was very, very fancy and very, very complicated and very, very clever and entirely the wrong thing. We got a prototype out in about 4 months, 6 months of this thing. We took it on the road across America. We had no contacts in the industry, so taking it on the road was a bit of a challenge, but we basically went through games magazines, found the heads of studios, made a big list, and guessed all of their email addresses, thought of every variation. We basically spammed them all with personalized messages saying things like, hey, we're going to be in your insert city here on insert day here. Can we drop in over lunch and show you a demo? And we succeeded in pitching 20-something game studios all around the US over a 3-week period, carrying 8 big Alienware laptops, demoing this multiplayer experience. And they told us it was clever, but we built the wrong thing. So we were sent back. Went back to Ireland with our tail between our legs and told the team the product was wrong. Back to the drawing board, built another one. It was slightly better. Took that out to market, went to the Games Developer Conference, got meetings. We're told, yeah, that's cool if it was in the 1990s, but it's the 2000s, dude, you know. You have to like get with the times. The architecture's wrong. It has to be peer-to-peer, not client-server. So we went back to the drawing board, built another product. This time it was peer-to-peer. It was close enough that we got a customer. And then we got another customer. And then those customers told us what they really needed, which was the fourth product. And we built that. And that was online services for video games. Basically something like Xbox Live, but for PlayStation. This is all before PlayStation Network. And that made the company. That just sold like hotcakes. Every video games company in the world, except for EA, basically wanted it. And we sold it to all of them. Yeah, so that's... and then we sold to our biggest customer, which was Activision, because we were working on Call of Duty and so on. That's the highlights. The marketing stuff was...
Yeah, so two questions, right? So the first one where you're talking to the 20 customers, they're telling you that your product's not right. You went back. Was part of you of those 20 customers are right, we now need to iterate, pivot, change? Or was part of you going, those customers don't know what they're talking about, let's just keep going? Because you're talking about the fourth time. So did you take the feedback on board, or you still like, actually, no, I'm going to back this horse continuously? How did you pivot? Or when did you pivot?
We pivoted straight away each time. I think there's you can't pivot wildly. What didn't change was the problem we were solving. Basically, that we were building middleware to help major AAA video games, the mainstream ones, go online for the first time. The details of how we do that, the architecture of the product, whether it's massively multiplayer or large multiplayer or small session-based games or client-server or peer-to-peer, we weren't married to any of that stuff. So long as we were solving the right problem for the right kind of customer. And within that, we pivoted freely and quickly.
You got a big customer, Activision bought you over, high on life. But I remember there was a marketing thing that was really interesting. I think I attended I attended a conference and I heard it, where you were presenting at the event, but you didn't have enough money to kind of go big on the marketing. So you kind of came up with an idea with a bus.
So Paul Hayes is a very well-known person in technology and PR in Ireland. And back then he worked with us. He had worked with Havoc before, and then he worked with us. He tells the story better. But he had previously come up with this tactic in Havoc of, instead of spending a lot of money on the booth at a major conference, and the conferences were the Game Developer Conference and E3. These were big conferences in San Francisco and Los Angeles with like 100,000 attendees, that kind of thing. You can spend any amount of money on a presence there, and a proper stand might cost a few $100,000 for a couple of days. And he learned you can spend a lot of money that way very, very quickly. But it's still not going to make much of an impact when the stand beside you is Microsoft and they spent $2 million on theirs. So he came up with this new tactic of, well, what if we do a conference around the conference? I find an interesting vehicle. And he found somehow a red double-decker London tour bus in LA and someone to drive it, and started circling the Staples Center. And I think he had that routine down, or he'd done it once or twice in Havoc. So when he joined us, we basically adopted that. And this became the Demonware thing. And it wasn't just a red double-decker bus driving around like the Staples Center in LA. In San Francisco, we had cable cars, like San Francisco cable cars that had been converted onto wheels instead of tracks. And we did the same in San Jose. And we run these cable cars around the conference center. And we put a bar on board, mojito bar. And we'd go around the conference giving people exclusive tickets to allow them on the bus anytime. And of course, we'd actually allow anyone on the bus, but the sense of exclusivity gave it a bit of magic.
Or like a waiting list.
Yeah. And so we curated the crowd a little bit, but it was highly visible around the conference, and then also highly practical, because once, like, we'd run it in the morning and we'd pick people up from hotels in a red London double-decker bus or a San Francisco cable car. We'd ferry them into the venue, and then if anyone ever needed anything, they had our phone numbers, they could call the bus in. We'd get them, or we'd take them from the conference off to the Microsoft party in Hollywood, or their Sony party, or back to the Fairmont Hotel or whatever. So it became famous, really.
And were you and the guys on the bus just drinking with everybody, kind of just having a good time? Is that what it was?
Yeah, pretty much. It's just visibility. Getting known as, like, guess what? There's middleware companies in Ireland, and it's, well, we were saying Demonware is, a real vendor in this industry. People know the name. They're like, "Are you going to Demonware, I think, tonight?" Or I was on the Demonware bus. Or did you get one of those Demonware t-shirts? Because the t-shirts were hilarious. They were like two humping bunnies, basically in silhouette, like Playboy style, with the word multiplayer underneath. So they're just like kind of risque, but really collectible. they were just a hit. People wanted those for years. They might still be going. Um, and that was all very cheap. It was guerrilla kind of marketing. The bus cost $20,000, rather than 200,000, and was at least as effective as the multiple millions that Sony and Microsoft were spending on their.
So I would have known you later in your journey from Jolt and Page Fair and things like that. Your successes, you've had a few. Ones that haven't been as successful, you've had a few. Where are you at now? What's been your kind of key learns along the way? Oh, again, my first question: why even going on this journey? Is it just you're addicted to the journey? You feel it's a problem that's worth solving?
I'm doing it because, well, from one point of view, it's all I really do. So I need to start companies. It's my skill set now. And then, like so many other people, this got back to AI circa November 2022. I had looked at it a bit as a PhD student, but you couldn't do an awful lot with AI in the early 2000s. So I focused elsewhere. And thinking deeply as I could about AI, and working with other startups. I was doing a lot of mentoring of other startups in Dogpatch Labs in Dublin at that time, and thinking about the future from the perspective of so many other companies that I was working with and mentoring. It led me to some conclusions, and not everyone would agree with these, but this is what I would bet on, is that the cost of software is going to zero, and pretty soon that's going to mean it'll be a pretty bad time to be a software entrepreneur. Right? Well, I mean, startups as we know them, at least in software, I think are going to go away. It hasn't happened yet, but I think it will. And this is going to be great for the world, that anyone can get software cheaply and quickly that's bespoke to them just by asking their computer to just do it. But that means, like, if there's another company, this is what I was thinking, like maybe last 2 years ago. If there's another company in me, I better figure out what it is damn fast, or just shift gear into something else. Go to woodwork, right? And then thinking, that lit a fire under me to think, okay, what can I really, with my skill set, with my network, with the people I can collaborate with and hire, with investors who trust me in this country, what can I build that I have an advantage doing that's necessary or important in the future as I see it playing out? So I spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the future looks like and what the future supply chain of software looks like if you fully play out AI and AI agents to its conclusion. And it took a while then within that picture to figure out a space where I thought, hang on, there is something important that people aren't building yet that's actually up my street. And it turned out to be Jentic. I think I'm delighted that I found something that actually stands up, and we can get into what Jentic does, but it wasn't a foregone conclusion. Like, I spent half of last year looking at this closely, and I wasn't sure there was going to be any company left to build that I was willing to bet the rest of my professional career on.
Because you were thinking about this 2 years ago, were you?
Well, it's 2025 now, so 2023.
Because you've seen some of the big companies come out now and say, we're aggressively going to dismantle SaaS and we're going to drive agentic, and this is the journey that we're on. We're going to try to reimagine.
SaaS is dead.
This is a lot of people are kind of talking about that, and they're going to look to work on it. So from the interviews I've done, very few people actually agree with what AI is. What the interviews I'm doing recently, people are way off in terms of what agentic AI is and AI agents, and so in your mind, what are AI agents and why do they matter?
So we're all familiar with AI chatbots, and to me, an AI agent is like a chatbot that does stuff. It doesn't just talk. It can perform actions rather than telling you what you should do. It'll go and do it for you. That's a reasonably good definition that's relatable to people. Right? There's plenty of others. You could say an agent should have autonomy of some type. I collected a list of definitions that I'd heard, and I think I got to 7 or 8 different ways that people mean AI agent. But I think it's useful to say it's an AI-driven process, right? So it's like it's a computer program that's thinking with it. It has a brain. The LLM is the brain bit. But what makes it different to a chatbot is it has something like a limbic system as well. Right? It has limbs and hands and fingers, and it can go use tools, connect to other systems to do stuff, and that makes it useful. That's where it's more than something to talk to.
So I'm trying to figure out where the money's at the moment, because we saw DeepSeek just before the new year come up with a model that's rivaling OpenAI. Still to be kind of fully tested, but it's reportedly 5.8 million. Hundreds, if not billions, now have been invested in these large language models. And the moat's probably closing in on that. So we're trying to figure out where is actually the money going to be made. And the infrastructure piece, a lot of people talk about data centers, a lot of people talk about infrastructure, or the kind of the AI plumbing kind of piece. This is where Jentic is trying to play a part, right?
Not data centers, but yeah, you could say plumbing. Where will the money be made? Picture that supply chain. Like, it'll be a good time to be in the business of building data centers. And if you're a country that's good at hosting data centers, that's going to be a big advantage for you. If you have good, clean energy, right? Think about the supply chain all the way down. This is like bounded by energy in many ways. So if you're France with abundant nuclear power, that's probably very, very good. There's questions about Ireland. We've good green power, like the wind when it's blowing, but a lot of the time it isn't blowing. So that we have gaps nationally here that we need to fill in terms of power. But starting at power, work up. Data centers are good. Then you get to the foundation models. Yeah, it's hard to play there. It's already quite commoditized as well. Like there's a lot of competition. It's not clear that it's a winner take all scenario, and obviously it takes billions to even like enter the ring, right? So that's not accessible to me. It's not accessible to most countries.
Because it feels like the only companies making money outside of Microsoft and Nvidia. Amazon have got a roadmap. Meta have done some incredible work in terms of what they're doing in that play, but you're trying to see where that kind of roadmap of kind of cash flow is going to come through. And you've raised over 4 million now.
Yeah, a little more than four. Yeah.
So burning through cash, is that going to be something that you've been very cognizant of, or what's your approach going to be to this AI plumbing, AI infrastructure piece?
Well, the part of the supply chain we're thinking about is if you start at an LLM and you go all the way up and you get to agents, right? Agent is like a script, in the simplest form, a Python script that's calling the LLM to do its thinking for it, right? And it's running it in some kind of loop, like make me a plan, get the first step, do the first step, update the plan, right? Keep on going until you get to a result. Now, how does it do that first step? It needs to go and connect to some other system and do something. Some agents are GUI agents or user interface agents. And they try to move the mouse around and type at the keyboard and use an application for you. That's great. That's very impressive when you see it working. But I don't think that's the future. I think wherever there is an API and an agent can operate at a data level, and instead of trying to use a human-focused user interface, it can use a machine interface instead, an API. It'll do that. That's far more reliable and cheaper. And most applications built in the last 15 years are API first. So we're thinking, okay, a future where agents need to connect to other systems to do work, and there's a lot of other systems to connect to, and they're doing it over APIs. What does that look like? And we realized that that's very complicated, right? It's not too hard to get, even today, to get one of these if connected to one system, right? And you pretty much know it's going to call one of these three functions within this one other system, like this HR system or an email provider or like a customer relation database or something. But if you start scaling this up and saying, well, actually, I have 10 different systems and I might want to do a number of different things in each of them, or 100 different systems, it begins to fall apart. It begins to get difficult to make it work reliably. Yeah. It turns into a lot of work to build, very difficult to make it work reliably, a lot of work to maintain as a developer because the underlying LLM evolves and then you have to go back and adjust the agent constantly so it still works. And then just keep on, think about this at an organization scale then. If you have the future of organizations is there's going to be not just a human org chart, but a shadow AI org chart behind it with agents at different levels doing different bits of the work. managing that AI organization is challenging as well, right? So each of those agents is complicated, but they might be talking to each other and talking to other systems. And what's this? If you want to run a responsible organization, you need to be able to answer questions like, what agents do I have? And what are they connecting to? And what data are they accessing? And what are they doing with the data? And where are they putting it?
I don't even know if I should ask you this question, 'cause I'm kind of guessing the answer here. But so let's say you're graduating from college again, you're now 22. What would you go and do? What advice would you be offering to younger listeners of the show?
Start using AI. You probably already are, right? But if you're not, embrace it. It's the rest of your life, basically, as a tool. There's an opportunity right now to build a lot of stuff, and people are going to make a lot of money. I mean, there's hype, right? And I know there's hype, and there's going to be ups and downs, and the hype cycle is going to be built up again to an impossible point, and then it will burst, and there'll be a lot of drama. But underneath all of that, AI is just going to keep on going. And even if it didn't, even if we hit some limit, and we're like, LLMs just can't go any further, it needs a new architecture, and no one comes up with one, right? For argument's sake, I think the revolution is still underway in terms of just figuring out all the places in the world where we can deploy the technology such as it currently is effectively. So embrace it. This is, if you're graduating this year, next year or something, I think this is probably your career. What happens though if you're graduating in 5 years, right? I mean, we're at the start of this massive platform shift. The big opportunities get sewn up early in the first few years. You see this with the internet and with mobile and with cloud and social, right? There wasn't a new competitor to Google coming out, 5 years later that got anywhere, right? The major platforms, the major dominant players in each platform shift, grab up the key strategic territory in the supply chain early. So if you're graduating in 2030, what do you do? That's a harder question. And I don't know. I don't know the answer. That's just beyond over the horizon for me. Hopefully there's still uniquely human valuable things to do. I think there will be, because all of this is for us, and generative media is great, but I mean, I'm not sure about you, but I'm already getting pretty tired of it. If I find myself reading something and I get the sense, I'm like, I think I'm putting more effort into reading this than anyone ever put into writing it.
Yeah.
I immediately dump it. I don't want to be in that situation. Therefore, I think we're all going to drive to authenticity.
Yeah.
It's already happening maybe anyway, but I think real events, in-person events, more analog forms of communication will come back, just so that we can trust that someone actually put effort into creating this thing.
But it's so funny, because in one way, we're all heavy in tech and, virtual and all this. But another way, you've got like ice baths that are $350 million industry. Next year, they're going to be it's going to be a $500 million industry. Saunas, which I was talking about, like hiking, kind of all these different types of stuff. All these different things, they're just skyrocketing because people want to go start embracing that. I just want to do in-person podcast. Yes, I'll do virtual, but I just want to meet people again. I want to talk to them. I want to understand their psyche. The whole AGI, ASI, is it fancy statistics? Are we going to get this, singularity? We've got Jeff Hinton over here saying we're in trouble. We've got everyone else going over here saying this is just numbers. What's your take on it?
It feels like we're close to AGI in some ways, right? I don't know about ASI or,
That's a different conversation. What is AGI?
OpenAI came up with a useful one, I suppose, but something broadly human-like in its capabilities, right? Not like ready to replace humanity overall, but could take over the job of a well-educated person in most situations. But I don't know. I think we'll probably get there, but it might be a long time away. There's clear things in the way, AI is like PhD level in various fields at the moment, and at the same time incredibly stupider than a fish. Right? It doesn't have spatial reasoning. It's trained on text. Text is one-dimensional data. It has no concept of the universe or something being adjacent to something else. And if you use AI a lot, you bump into these cases where you realize for some reason it's just incredibly stupid about this question you need answered. It's brilliant at other stuff. It can be very, very, very dumb as well. So it's not like human intelligence as it stands. There might be new architectures required in order to get there, where the architecture of a brain, and obviously this is well studied, is very different to like one big LLM. As it's massively scaled to try to simulate what a brain produces, which is far more complex and has different parts, layers essentially that were added over by evolution over time. Yeah, so it might need to look quite different before it's truly human. And in the meantime, in order to produce human level outputs, there might be a path there, but it's going to require a lot of work. Like, it takes a lot of energy. If we come up with a AGI or something that's human level with the current architecture, it might take, like a country's worth of electricity power flying into acres of data centers.
We already see with NVIDIA, like 40% of the resources in the Taiwan gets used in some cases.
Yeah. So that will get better over time, like everything else. But we have to remember that right now, I think what we run on about 30 watts. Yeah, it's not going to be practical to replace people with AGI the way we're currently building it on a full-time basis, just for energy and space constraints for some time. So I don't know. We're on that path. Before we even get to those kinds of science fiction scenarios, though, there's all kinds of more practical, banal type of evils we need to address. And it's interesting to see, like the EU AI Act is an attempt to get in front of some of those. I mean, I think if you look in China, there's a lot of state surveillance that's AI powered going on, and EU AI Act in some ways is an attempt to prevent that from even getting started in Europe, in any state, to make it illegal. And a lot of other stuff in terms of representation bias in data and the way that AI could get embedded and end up discriminating against people just implicitly in all kinds of ways, whether it's access to healthcare or insurance or education or a job. At the same time, I don't want to talk up the EU AI Act too much, because I think as an entrepreneur, it's going to be a really big problem to be doing an AI company from Europe because of it. Interesting times now.
Sean Blanchfield, thank you for your time.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Cheers.
We're passionate about collaboration and sharing the incredible stories behind every AI journey. That's why we're always looking for guests to join our in-person AI Island podcast experience. If you're working on innovative AI projects or have a story that can inspire others, we want to hear from you. This is your chance to share your insights, experiences, and ideas with a really vibrant community that's as excited about AI as you are. So if you're ready to be part of this conversation and help shape the future of AI in Ireland, please get in touch today. We can't wait to collaborate with you.